I like this song. I have a confession. I just fell in love again with Gary. Here's a CEO that truly understands that it's all about the people. So thank you very much, Gary. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Too many companies have HR sitting in the corner, just doing either hiring or firing. I think that it is time that we get out into the light. Not only supporting managers, but assisting driving the business. And one of the ways that we can do that is by people development. So hence my speech here, continuous learning enables competitive advantage. This is me. I'm an independent consultant, but up until recently, I was the head of corporate learning for SimCorp. SimCorp is a software company who does software or develops software for the financial industry, so help asset managers basically manage assets and minimizes risks and those sort of things. Before we get started, I would like to tell you a little story about my good friend Jesper. This is Jesper. I actually met Jesper's wife. She became my friend 25 years ago, and she introduced me to Jesper about 15 years ago. They're both very dear, good friends of mine. And in January this year, they went to a long-awaited vacation to Thailand. We had a lot of fun about them going to Thailand and me being in Copenhagen in the cold. And they were so kind to send me photos of their vacation and teasing me a little bit. And then send me text messages and so on. And then one Friday morning, Annette sent me a text message, which I would like to read out for you. It goes, "Dear Claus, what started as a joyful and fantastic family vacation to Thailand 2 weeks ago has now ended dramatically. Wednesday this week, Jesper jumped into the ocean and hit the seabed and broke his neck. Yesterday, he went through a 6-hour complicated surgery where doctors removed some of the bone from his hip and attached this to his spine to allow space for a squeezed nerve. Over time, this will hopefully enable Jesper to use his limbs again, which is the most optimistic that I can say right now. Jesper is in a really bad shape, but when he is stable, he will be transferred to Copenhagen, and he will probably spend months in hospital. The kids and I are okay, but I don't think the reality has hit us yet. I'm trying to create some sort of normality out here, but not sure how we're gonna manage when we return. We might need your help. Love, Annette." That was a really bad text message to get a Friday morning. A couple of days later, I received this photo. This is Jesper attached to a bed in a Bangkok hospital. Not really optimistic at any point here, but only a few days later, I received this photo, which is much better because I could see the smile and the sort of the fighter instinct in Jesper's eyes. I would like to, Mitch, if you could cue that video up and then just show that. This is Jesper learning how to walk again. He's attached to a machine who is helping him to walk. Basically, it is walking for him. It is his right-hand side, which is the most injured. So the machine and the nurses and doctors can set it up so that it actually supports 90% of his right leg to walk and only 20% of his left leg. And that's how he actually works, how he learns how to walk again. We can move on now. I think you got the idea here. So this is Jesper actually getting electro treatment. So basically that's electric pulses that helps the muscles contract and open up. And the thing is that Jesper is not working and training his whole body. Jesper is a fighter, and he knows that by working many, many hours every day, continuously learning how to walk again, this will make him, it will increase his life. So what I wanted to show here is that basically this is showing that he's working on very specific muscles. So it's not his whole body that he's training, he's actually working these specific muscles. So why am I showing this? Well, basically because continuous learning for Jesper, working on those right skills or competencies or muscles, actually enables him to lead a better life. Or in business, that would be to lead to a competitive advantage. So that brings me back to continuous learning enables competitive advantage, because what is important here is that we can't train in everything. We have to train in what is business critical. And that leads me then to how do we link competencies to business strategy? How do we use a competency framework and the 70-22 to do dialogues for development? How do we use big data in small companies? And then at the very end, why do we measure return on investment when we can focus on what really matters? So let's dig into it. So when I started in SimCorp a couple of years back, learning and training has always been on the agenda. However, it's very decentralized. So let me use an example for, let's say, project management. So in Germany, they went, so I have a cousin that can help us out with project management. And in Britain, they said, we want the Prince 2 certification. In the US, they said something different. So we had no idea how many people we actually sent on courses, if they got anything out of it, how much money we spent, and those sort of things. So my task was basically to standardize these different things and do a learning operating model and those sort of things. They did have a system or a database full of 150 different job profiles and over 300 different competencies. And that was a monster, it was a beast, it was not to maintain, and it wasn't really rolled out into the organization. Nobody really bought into it. So what did we do? Well, to me, we wanted to make sure that we had competencies that were business critical. So we came up with the business strategy learning analysis, which is this. So I went to the executive board and asked them, so what is the 2020 plan? So what is the overall strategy? Please tell me what is it that we want to achieve? And we put that in there. And then we went to the different functions or departments and asked them, so what are the KPIs and the strategy that you have for your specific function? And we linked that back to the overall strategy. Let's take project managers again. So we asked the managers of project managers 2 questions. We asked them, first of all, what are the key behaviors that you would like to see for a high-performing project manager? So those are the behaviors here, and we linked that back to the KPIs of the department. And then we asked them the second question, which is, what are the skills and knowledge you need in order to have those behaviors? So we documented that and then linked that back to the behaviors and so on and so forth. So we asked the managers, and we also asked representatives of those project managers who were high performers. So by doing this, you can say that you need to know how to do Gantt charts, because then that would lead to a certain behavior, that would then lead to the KPI of the function, that would then lead to the business overall strategy. So this is how we actually did it. And then we did some other research and talks and so on, trying to figure out not all of these skills and so on are equally important. Which ones of these are actually business critical? So in this way, we actually had a complete overview of skills and knowledge for each of the job roles linked to the strategy. So in our company and previously, they have been very much focused on functional competences. Functional competences for us were let's say programming, so we're a software company, right? So developing in C# or in SQL or databases or stuff like that. That was hugely important for us. But the thing is that if you are to be a persistent high performer, it is not enough that you're really good at programming in C#. If you are to be a persistent high performer, you also need to know how to collaborate, how to work together, how to be result-oriented and those sort of things. And we call that behavioral competences. See, as I mentioned before, they had done something about this previously, and that was a monster. And one of the things that they did that was that they came up with all the things themselves. So all the descriptions and so on were something that they did themselves. So I wanted to go in a different direction. We teamed up with a global competency framework here, who had all the descriptions that we needed. So it's a standardized way to do it. And that immediately had some good things about it also in the company. So what we did was basically, we had something from the previous database, and we took that out, and then we had information from the managers. We had that in the second pile, and then from the actual employees, we had that in the third pile. And then we started to map it out. Which of these competencies are functional, and which of these are behavioral? And then we started to map that towards the standardized way to do it. So one of the things could be that our project managers need to get things done. That would map into, for instance, being either action-oriented or result-oriented. So we started really to map these things out. So at some point, we had a competency profile that had functional competences, behavioral competences, and then a thing, again, for our project managers, everyone in SimCorp said, we want them to be enthusiastic. And enthusiasm was not something that was either a functional competence or something that was in this standardized way of doing things. So we actually created sort of a fifth factor, which was SimCorp related. So all in all, it looks like this. I know some of it is small, but that's not the point here. The idea is basically to say that on the top here, we have the behavioral competences. At the bottom here, the functional competences. And over here on the right-hand side, we have the, let's say, SimCorp-related behaviors. For instance, if you are skilled in your role, you show great enthusiasm and loves to take ownership of a problem. So that's where we put in the SimCorp-specific stuff. This is how our competency profiles look. Let me say, first of all, it's a conceptual drawing, obviously, but what is marked in green on the top there were those 12 behavioral competences that we deemed necessary for a project manager. So that could be something like manages complexity, cultivates innovation, action-oriented, collaborates, builds effective teams, and so on and so forth. When we use this in training and in learning and in people development and in development talks, we talk about the 70-20-10. I assume that everyone knows about the 70-20-10 learning principle, so I won't get into the details as such. But in our company, previously, we were really good at the 10%. So for instance, again, project managers, we sent them on a project management course, closed our eyes and hoped for the best. And we've all been there, right? In terms of getting on a course. And sometimes we came back and said they had a really good chocolate fountain at lunch, and that was what we got out of it. And other times they said, hey, we had this really great methodology. But a week or two later, we just fell back into what was daily life. So we tried to come up with another way of doing these things and new things that we did, learning activities and so on. We tried to embed all the 70-20-10. But what we found was that the functional competences worked really well with the 10%, to begin with at least. So for instance, if I'm sitting now in my development talk and I'm not so good at SimCorp dimension is the product, risk analysis, product lifecycle, and those sort of things. I could just basically click on this in our learning management system and then get the courses that I need, certified front office expert, basic project management, and those sort of things. See, what is more difficult for both our company, but I think for many companies, are those behavioral competences. How do we train in that? How do we become better at instills trust or courage or being resilient? How do we train in that? That's difficult. So by teaming up with this standardized framework, they had tips and tricks that we could actually use. So again, I'm sitting in my development talk, and you can see that big red dot there in the middle, build effective teams. I'm not so good at it. My manager would come to me and say, Claus, let's talk about these things. So we double click this bit again, and then we move into the learning management system, who had, let's say, discussion questions. So I could talk to my manager again, and we could talk about, so this whole thing about building effective teams, is it because you need solid team players? Is it because you're questioning the team size? Is it because too much individualism? Or what is this about? And once we figure out, well, it's about, let's say, need solid team players, I could click that again and then get some tips and tricks to, for instance, analyze the key purpose, task, and deliverables of the team, and then ask who's best suited for the work. So we had a ton of different ways to work with this in the company. So that's how we use this. In the beginning, we also had rating scales. We rated towards all the different competences. But basically we found with this whole let's say, trend away from performance reviews as such, that we just basically took out the rating scale here, because it seemed that it was so important for people, whether they got a 5 or a 4 or a 6 or a 2, that they just completely forgot the whole point, which was, what do you need to train to become better? So we just took it away. And now we call this a dialogue tool for progression. So now it's a dialogue tool. And obviously, once we've done this talk, we document it in our learner management system. We call it SIMP People, and we document it in a development plan. So that's how we use it, and that's how we also focus on what is only business critical. I want to ask you a question. What are the top reasons for people leaving in your company? You don't need to use those, you can, but either just yell it out. Top reasons for people leaving your company. They don't like the person they work with. Could be managers or coworkers. Yeah. Managers, yeah. There's a saying, as you know, that people join a company, but they leave a bad manager. True. Any other reasons? Money. So compensation and so on. Yeah. Fair pay. What's that? Work-life balance, fantastic. So for us, for instance, it was career progression, learning and development. And how do we know that? We do exit surveys every month, or we bring it together every month, and this is from our exit survey in March 2016. This is the top reason: career progression, learning and development. And this is not just us, this is also confirmed globally by the CEB Executive Board. And if you look into the literature as well, these are some of the top things: exciting work and challenge, career growth, learning and development. They're working with great people, that's the one who came over here, fair pay and so on and so forth. So those are definitely top reasons, and also one of the reasons that we should really focus on people development. So when I took this out to the company, we're about 1,200 people around the world, so I had the pleasure of traveling and see all our managers in the company. I brought this with me because we had managers, and also what Gary mentioned before, that middle managers are the most crucial for rolling these things out. So we talked to them, and this is what I talked to them about. I think that everyone needs a profound understanding of the responsibility and the importance of people development. I think that managers have an obligation to develop their teams, and not just an obligation, but they should wake up in the morning and go, hey, how can I train and develop my team today? That would be fantastic. That's the ambition that I want to have for our company. But it's not just the manager's responsibility, it's also the responsibility for the employees themselves. I mean, we're all responsible for our own development. So high performers challenge status quo through continuous learning. I really believe that. High performers challenges status quo through continuous learning. So once we have the belief there, we need to have solid, standardized competency profiles that are linked to the business strategies so that we know that we're doing, and provides a solid, transparent platform to develop from. That's the profiles that I just showed you. And then we need those EPR talks, those employee performance reviews. It has to be a safe setting to talk about career aspirations and future desires. I worked in companies previously where we couldn't talk about that. I couldn't talk to my manager about, what are my ambitions and where do I want to be in a couple of years. I don't know. I really don't know why. Maybe they were afraid that I was leaving or taking that job or whatever it might be. But I've also been in companies where we could talk very openly about these different things, and that was so much better, feeling comfortable and all these things that Gary talked about before. But it has to be also a candid and open discussion about development potential. Let's say that I talk to my manager about, hey, I want to be the CEO of SimCorp in 2 years. And she would probably, in a candid and open way, say, Claus, that's probably not the best idea for you. Let's find something that is more suitable. And I think that's important, that we have those safe environments where we can talk about these things. And then basically, if this is what you want in a couple of years, then let's put it into your development plan, because there are certain phases that you need to go through in order for you to achieve that job at some point. And then I strongly believe that we have to have a supporting IT system. We had what we called here SIMP People. That is the link between the training solutions and the development potential, and holds the development plans so that time for training can be allocated. I think that if we do this right, if we do this properly, then it will be a competitive advantage for our company. Not only because we are able to attract and retain the top talents that are out there. Top talents don't, and especially millennials, they don't want to be status quo. They want to be continuously growing and learning and so on. And if we can tell them that we are actually doing something here, they will choose our company. And once we get the best people in there, we can also go to our customers and say, hey, we actually put quite a lot of resources, money, time into developing our people so that we are on the forefront of things, which means for you, dear customer, that you will have better products, better services, and that we will anticipate what you need going forward. I strongly believe that if we do this correctly and properly, that it is a competitive advantage for our company, and this is how we get into the executive suite or the C-suite of our company and tell this story. When we did this a couple of years back in the company, we started to look at data. We started to have data that we didn't have before. So when I did the competency framework, I had a colleague who did a career framework, and we worked together on doing that. But once we did this and started to put people in there, we got data that we didn't have before. So this is our career framework. We had job families. So we had sales, services, advisory, product development, and management. And the thing is, once we started to put data in, we could also, as I mentioned before, get it out. So we could, in a way, more graphically see where are our people actually situated in our company. So only 50 of our people were in sales, and almost 500 in product development, and so on and so forth. So we could also see where should we actually focus. Maybe we should focus a little bit more on product development than in sales, for instance. Or we could go back to top management and say, if we have trouble in selling our products, maybe we should have more salespeople here. We could see that from here. And if we digged or drilled further down into this, we could actually see of those job families, and we could break it down into sub-families, and we could start to see where are people sitting. And again, one thing that came as a surprise for us in training and learning was the testing that we had. I barely knew that they existed, to be honest, but now I could see that's a fairly big amount of people. Maybe we should focus some of our training here. That also goes for IT. At some point, my mistake, I know, that I just thought that they were the ones delivering our computers when we started and so on, to make sure that the Wi-Fi was working. However, they did a lot of other stuff, and maybe we should focus more on them. Also coming back to what is business critical. Some of the other things that we could see was where are our people situated? We could see here that about 82% of our people are in the expert or the professional streams, which are our experts, and about 12% in our management stream, which makes a lot of sense. But what we could also see is that this is the progression and you can say the importance of people. So we had a lot of people in P2 and P3 and P4, but maybe we need people to come into P1 so we can build that we can start workforce planning, we can build that succession planning and so on. And those were things that we could also start to do with this data. And we could also look at this one here, which is basically the darker part here is people that has been in the company for more than 10 years. And we can see that makes a lot of sense that the more experience and the higher they were in the hierarchy, they have been there longer. That makes sense. But when we start to correlate that with age, we could start to see, hey, in a few years, maybe a lot of our workforce is going on retirement. So maybe we should start do something about it. My point here is just by showing these few slides is that once you start to do these things, even though you're a small company, we're 1,200 people, you can actually start to use this data, and HR all of a sudden becomes strategic for the executive board compared to being operational and doing the hiring and firing and stuff like that. The last thing I wanted to talk about is measure what matters. How many of you have fought for budget? Just by a raise of hands. Yeah, everyone, right? And how many of you every single year have to argue, why is people development important? About half of you. And that's my point as well, that when I was in the recruitment process for this job, I asked to see the CEO. And I sat down, his name is Claus as well, and I asked Claus and said, do you really want to do this? Do you really believe in people development? He said, yes. Do you really believe that people development can do a difference for the company? And he said, yes. That's why I started. Because now I don't have to make that argument every single year why we have to spend money on learning and training and people development. I still have to fight for my budget, but I don't have to argue why it is important. And I think that's the discussion that we need to take with our C-suite instead of arguing every year why it's important that we do this. That also means that to me, we shouldn't measure ROI, the return on investment. To me, it doesn't simply make any sense because it's so difficult to take a particular or individual training activity, let's say in project management, and then look and see what that does for either revenue or bottom line. It's just not possible. I think it can be possible, though, in, let's say, retail, where you do a training session on something and then you immediately can see something. That's fine. But in the work that we do, we can't see it. And that means that when we train, we also do evaluations, but we do it on something that matters more to me, at least, which is behavioral change. You all know Kirkpatrick, level 1, 2, 3, and 4. We don't do level 4, so let's get rid of that one. We do level 1, 2, 3. And the way that we do it is that we have a course or a program, and then when we build that course or program, we obviously have a lot of effort into creating the right learning objectives, and especially, what is it that we want to change afterwards? So what should people start doing, stop doing, do more of, do less of? So what are the behavioral changes that we would like to see after this course? From that, we create questions covering knowledge, attitude, intent, and behavior. And we have that collective pool of, let's say, 100 questions for a course. So now the course is running, and obviously we do the happy sheet, the level 1 reaction, the happy sheet after a course. That's fine, but doesn't really give us anything. Then the level 2, we do a pre-test and a post-test. And we take 20 randomly picked questions from that collective pool and give that to people. And then obviously we do a repeated post-test as a level 3. And I know that some theories says that that is enough, and some theories say that you have to do other stuff. And that's true. You can do 360s and you can do all sorts of different things. But for us, who hasn't been accustomed to doing evaluations, this is more than enough to do it like this. And we're disturbing people's time, blah, 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 all those things. So the point is here that once you do this, obviously you get some numbers. So let's say the pre-test here is on 35% of the knowledge, and hopefully after the course, people will get at 90%, and then 3 months later at 80%. And that for us is okay. So that's how we do it, and that's how we measure what is truly important. We've also worked, we haven't done it, we've tried, but we haven't done it to the fullest yet. And this works especially with e-learning. But basically, if you take the course again and then divide it into, let's say, sections of A, B, C, and D, and then you do the pre-test, and the pre-test will give you a couple of numbers. It'll give you 80%, 85, 45, and 90%. The whole point of that is then that if this is the case, then the participant only needs to do section C. And that saves time. It is becoming more relevant and so on and so forth. So that's another way of doing evaluations more proactively in a way. So that's how we do it. Before we end here, I'd just like to say that Jesper's focus on critical competences and continuous learning has paid off. Here he is, just a couple of weeks back on the left-hand side there. In the middle, he is, I forgot actually to say this in the beginning, he's a very talented chef. He's actually the head chef of the royal family in Denmark. So here in the middle, he's actually working together, or they are at a conference together with Christetta Comerford. She's the head chef of the White House and President Obama. So that's there in the middle. And Jesper is there on the right-hand side on his, I'm not really sure what that is called in English, but he's running on that thing. What is it called? All right, okay. So here he is. I just wanted to show you that he's actually doing pretty good. If you can't remember everything, then at least remember these 3 things. Continuous learning, focusing either on the right competences or on the right skills, leads to a competitive advantage. Thank you very much, and I think we have a few minutes for questions if you like. Anyone? Yeah?
This isn't a question, it's a comment. Your competency model, how you drilled down that the person identified the area that they wanted to develop in, and then you had things that they could actually work on, that's building it in. What was our question earlier? How do we make the work a practice field? That seemed like a way to do, way to actually do that, answer that question.
Yeah, so if I understand the question correctly, so using that competency profile and have that as a dialogue tool, how do we then transfer that into a practice field of work, yeah?
I'm saying that I think you did that in a way.
Yeah, and I think that to build on that, I think what is important that when they look at the competency profile and say, okay, you need to know more about communication, for instance, then the dialogue that we have is basically, why don't you go and talk to Tim from communications, or why don't you go and talk to Karen? She's really good at PowerPoint presentations, so that we really use the peer-to-peer and collaborative learning, but we also use the 70 and the 20% instead of just sending people on a communications course. Yeah, thank you. Any other questions? All right, thank you very much.